Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Robin, or Hobbit's reading list, and today we are filming my June TBR. So June is one of my favorite months, obviously, and this month I'm really going to try to make my TBR as queer as possible. I know I already have some books that I have to read this month that are just not, but there's only 3 of those. So that means that the other 4, potentially more, will be queer, or as much as I can make them. Sometimes I don't have a choice. For people who haven't seen my TBR game, TBR Pursuit, I play on the Lord of the Rings Trivial Pursuit board. And each color represents a different genre that I read most often, which is classics are red, romance is orange, blue is LGBT, green is Jewish, brown is psychology, and yellow is fantasy. And these spaces at the end that are slightly bigger are the miscellaneous. So those account for every other book that I have on my physical shelves that I haven't read yet, that don't fall into those 6 categories. So I typically do 7 rolls, and those will determine my books for the month. Now there is the purple roll again spots. Those add a book. So I could potentially get way more than 7. I believe my record is 9. I am going to try to not have a roll again. 1, because I do have a consequence book because I didn't finish all the books from my May TBR. And I will tell you what the consequence book is at the end of the video. And also because I am going on vacation in about 4 days. 2 from when you see this. So that week I'm not going to have a ton of time for reading, so I don't really want to add on to the 8 books that I already have to read. And that's assuming I can fit my 3 books that I have to read into the categories that I get, which is not guaranteed because that hasn't happened but once, I think. So that's enough of me talking. Let's get into the game. So for the first book, which is always my favorite because I get to choose which direction I go in. 1. Wow, okay. You know what, let's go Jewish. And so, I didn't explain this part. Whatever color I land on, these are already shuffled, and I just go through until I find the first green card in this case, and I pick that. Okay, so the Jewish book that is the highest rated. This may be a little difficult. 1, because there's no good way for me to search on Storygraph what Jewish books I have, so I might just have to go through the actual shelf. And I picked it because I have a Jewish book that I need to read in June, and I highly doubt it'll be the highest rated one. So, great. So for my first roll, I got a Jewish book that is the highest rated. So I had to create a list on Goodreads because Storygraph doesn't list things like if they're like Jewish. They just have like a religious thing, and that's all nonfiction. So that didn't quite encompass my Jewish shelf that's right there. So I had to create a list on Goodreads and then rank it. I got Here All Along by Sarah Hurwitz. I believe on Goodreads it's rated like a 4.32. So this is a nonfiction book about finding meaning, spirituality, and a deeper connection to life in Judaism. So this was actually recommended to me by some friends that I have at Temple, and so I immediately added it to my list. So I'm actually looking forward to this because they all really enjoyed it and resonated with it. So I like this one, even though it's, to my knowledge, not queer. There might be a little bit in there about queerness though, so that'll be nice. For the second book, okay, Well, that will help with trying to get my TBR as queer as possible. So blue is LGBT. And it's the biggest book. So biggest in this case is page number. So that will be fun. And I don't even know if this guarantees that it'll be fiction. It might not be. Well, let's see what I picked. My second book, I got LGBTQ, and it's the biggest. So this is the book with the most amount of pages, which is Mr. Jingle Bells by Leta Blake. It's not that I don't want to read this. However, it is quite large, and it's totally the wrong season. In the vlog that I posted most recently, I asked people to leave me comments for queer rom-coms set in the summer, preferably in like a beach town. So this is just a little frustrating. But you know what? I'm sure it's gonna be great. And I was planning on reading it in December, but this is fine too. Christmas in July is a thing. This is just a month early. Wow, this is gonna be a really boring game. So now it's red, so it's a classics. Okay. It's a classics with an odd number of pages. This is between this and the Jewish book with the highest rated and the LGBT book that is the biggest. I'm not getting a lot of choice in this so far, which kind of sucks. I wanted it to be super queer. A classic with the odd number of pages. So this was actually a little hard, especially with my self-imposed I want it to be queer rule. So go with me a little bit. Because a lot of people probably not going to agree with me on this, and that's fine. But I have the annotated Hobbit. So I've read The Hobbit, but this has annotations, which, one, is going to be really cool, but two, means it's actually going to take me a really long time to read. But it has an odd number of pages, and I am someone who ships Bilbo and Thorin together because of the movies, and I haven't read The Hobbit since watching the movies a decade ago. So I'm about time for a reread, and I ship Bilbo and Thorin, so therefore it's queer. Don't at me. The fourth book. Thank you. Alright, well I still have to go this way, so 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't just go here. Like, I can use it as a spot to get to another spoke, but I can't just stop there, so looks like I'm getting another book. Alright. For the fourth book. So that would be romance. 2, 3. That'd be another book. Or classics. Let's go ahead and do romance. Oh, this is hard. So it's a romance set at school. I have gotten this prompt before, and I had to go to Barnes & Noble and buy a book because I didn't realize that I don't have many of these when I first created this prompt. So, looks like I might be going shopping. For a romance set at a school, I actually lucked out. I did not have to go shopping for this because I just went shopping last week, but because TBR had recommended a young adult book to me that is queer, because that's something I asked them to do. But it's Spellbound by F.T. Lukens. So with this, our main character, Rook, is going to essentially be an apprentice under this, I don't know what they're actually called, but mage named Antonia. And he has to keep it hidden that he has this, like, device that, like, blocks magic or gets him magic. He's trying to, like, reconnect with the magic that he lost when his grandmother died. But eventually this device is found out, and so Antonia is taken away and he has to go save her. And in order to do that, he has to team up with Antonia's rival's apprentice, son, who he happens to find very attractive. So, yay, it's queer! The 5th book. I have to re-roll? 6. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Classic story. You know what? I don't remember if I had a miscellaneous in the last game, so let's go ahead and do a miscellaneous. Okay, so it's a nonfiction about feminism. And yes, I have several. I'm looking directly at these books, actually. So this will be really interesting because they're all quite large. So, a miscellaneous book about feminism. I actually didn't have to go into nonfiction, which is good because I already have one nonfiction. And that's kind of my limit. I don't like reading more than one nonfiction because nonfiction takes me a very long time to read. So, I put in Storygraph, I wanted a book about feminism, and there's a fiction book that I bought a couple months ago called A Ghost in the Throat by Doireann Ghríofa, I think. I'm probably going to butcher her name every time I talk about this, as well as the names of the characters in the book, because it's a very Irish book, which is something that drew me to it. But I'm gonna have to look up how to actually pronounce the names. So I'm not going to try to tell you what the plot is about because it has names, and but I will read you the little itty bitty bit at the end. It says, moving fluidly between past and present, quest and elegy, poetry and those who make it, A Ghost in the Throat is a shape-shifting book, a record of literary obsession, a narrative about the erasure of a people, of a language, of women, a meditation on motherhood and on translation, and an unforgettable story about finding your voice by freeing another's. So, I think this sounds really interesting. I actually, really want to read this right now. So, thank you for coming through Storygraph, because otherwise I would have had to read nonfiction. For the 6th book, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I guess we're gonna choose another classic. Yeah, because I already have an extra book. I'm not gonna do that to myself. Adapted to screen. So, past or future means that it has been adapted to the screen or it is in production to be adapted to screen. So, I'm okay with this. For a classic that has been adapted to screen, I could have picked up another Austen quite easily. But I was already looking at the stack of books that I have, as well as the 3 other books that don't fit in any of the prompts that I've had so far. And I just needed a short book. So I found the shortest book on my shelf that has been adapted to screen, which is The Subterraneans by Jack Kerouac. I really like On the Road by Jack Kerouac. I'd say it's not one of my favorite books, but it's definitely up there. So I believe I got this book when I was in New York because I haven't read any other Kerouac and I was interested in it. So this was written sort of in the same way as On the Road. It was written over 3 days and 3 nights, and it's centering on a romance that is pretty much falling apart, which makes sense for Kerouac. I'm really looking forward to this. Hopefully it has the same level of writing as On the Road, because that's what I really fell in love with. I thought it was just an interesting way to write, so we'll see what happens. 7th roll. Romance or fantasy? I don't have a fantasy yet. It's a fantasy. It's the smallest book. I'm not getting options. These are all, like, statistics based. Which is unfortunate, because I wanted it to be super queer. This is why I shouldn't set goals for myself, because inevitably it doesn't work. Okay. A fantasy that is the smallest book, so direct opposite from earlier, the book with the least amount of pages. And I would make an argument that this is also queer, or at least it's queer coded. Let's say that, because it's the Atlas of Middle-earth. So, is this queer coded? No. Is Middle-earth as a whole queer coded? A lot of it. In my opinion. I'm sure there are many people who disagree with me, and that's fine. It's exactly what it says on the tin. I am looking forward to reading it though, because I write a lot of Lord of the Rings and Hobbit, like, fan fiction. I always like learning more about the world that Tolkien created, because it's bonkers how much he created. So this is gonna be fun for me. Okay, what is presumably the last roll? This is the 8th book. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, not that way. 2, 3, 4, 5. LGBT. 2, 3, 4, 5. Or Jewish. Well, since I haven't really gotten a lot of choice to make it queer, let's go with LGBT. And a TBR veteran. So this means that it has to be an LGBT book that has been on my shelves for at least a year, because I only really started reading again recreationally about a year ago. So that'll be interesting. For my bonus roll, I got an LGBTQ book that is a TBR veteran. Surprisingly, I don't have that many. I think besides the book that I picked, I had like one other. So I find that really interesting. That means that I've gotten a majority of the LGBT books that I have in the past year. So, okay. And I'm just saying that because I have a lot. So that really just goes to show you how many books I've bought in the past year. No wonder why Chris is so upset with me. But anyway, I have the best lesbian erotica of 2009. So I believe I've had this, not since 2009, but I believe I've had this for probably 6 or 7 years. It's edited by Tristan Taormino. I've read some of her works before that she's like put together, and I think she's a really great editor. So this should be really interesting. I'm gonna stop showing on screen now. I'm looking forward to this. I don't know how I feel about like short stories. I don't read a ton of them, just because it takes me a little bit to get into stories, and then short stories I get into it and then they're over and it makes me sad. So we'll see how that goes. Last but definitely not least, it's my consequence book. I didn't read all the books from my May TBR. I had my dad look through the books on my shelf and pick out a book that he felt, it's not a book that he thinks I won't like. It's a book that he feels like I should read, whether I like it or not. Luckily, this one I think I will like, and all I said was that I asked him to pick a queer book because I was trying to make my TBR as queer as possible for June. So he picked Maurice by E.M. Forster. So this is following a man named Maurice since the time he was 14 going into adulthood, and how he handles being a gay man in the Edwardian era. So this was written by Forster but published after he died because it has a happy ending. And at that time, that was not acceptable. So I am really looking forward to this. I think I'll really like it. I haven't read Forster before, so I have no idea what the writing's going to be like. But I'm eager. So I have 8 books on my TBR. And I have 3 other books that I have to read. So I have to read Quick Service by P.G. Wodehouse. I have no idea what it's about. I haven't even bought it. I should do that soon. and I will be reading that for the podcast that my dad and I do on PG Wodehouse. So there's that. I also am going to read The Boston Girl by Anita Diamond for my Temple Book Club that I run. I read it probably like 6 years ago. I read it like right when I was starting to convert. So it's about a Jewish girl when she's like 17, sort of like looking back on this summer and her time living in Boston, as well as going to, I believe it's Cape Cod. And I know when I'll be reading that because I have to have it read by June 12th, and so it looks like I'm taking it to Boston with me, which is just fitting, really. And then the other one, I was going to try to do a reread of The Glass Ocean, because I read that in January and I picked it for the family book club, and I wanted to reread it so I could come up with my own book club questions besides the ones that are included. So that brings me a total to 11 for June when I'm going on vacation, and I wanted the TBR to be small. Clearly I do really well with setting limits for myself. So, with my bullcrapping a little bit, I have 6 queer books out of 11, which is not the best, but it's also not the worst. It's very mid, which is fitting for me, I suppose. So now I get to start reading. Please leave a comment if you've read any of these books, or if any of these books are on your TBR and we can talk about them. Leave a suggestion if there's a book in particular you want me to start with besides The Boston Girl. That pretty much has to be the first one, just because I have to have it read so quickly and questions written about it so quickly. Yeah, comment, like the video, subscribe, click the notification bell so you get notified every time that I post a video. I'm really going to try to post twice a week, but I haven't been the best at that, but I'm constantly working on improving. But wish me the best of luck, and look for my vlogs, because that's where I will give you my real-time thoughts of the books as I'm reading them, and boy do I have a lot. Bye!